The great chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that orbited the neutral planet known as Prime World. Inside, representatives from 100 different alien species gathered under glowing lights that changed colors to match the moods of the speakers. Captain Dewan stood at the human podium, his dark uniform looking plain and simple compared to the elaborate clothes and armor worn by the other delegates. Next to him, Commander Jiwoo kept her face calm, but her fingers moved slightly over her data pad, recording everything. Behind them, old Ambassador Hyun-sik sat quietly in his chair, his white hair and tired eyes showing the weight of 30 years trying to make the galaxy respect humanity. Daewon finished his speech and waited. He had asked for permission to build defensive stations in human space, 3 small weapons platforms to protect the outer colonies. It was not a big request. Many other species had thousands of such stations. Humans only wanted 3. The chamber filled with sounds, not the sounds of translation devices or diplomatic whispers. The sounds were laughter. Overlord Vraxian rose from his seat. He was massive, standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick gray skin and 4 arms. His species, the Krellites, controlled one of the largest empires in the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice boomed through the chamber like thunder. "Defensive stations?" Vraxian said and laughed again. "Tell me, little human, what exactly do you need to defend against? Your own children playing with toy weapons?" More laughter rippled through the chamber. Daewon felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face neutral. Jiwoo's fingers stopped moving on her pad. A thin reptilian creature named Nalturek stood up next. He was a scientist who studied what he called primitive species. He held up a holographic display that showed images from Earth's history. "I have spent 5 years studying human civilization," Nalturek said in his hissing voice. "And I must share my findings with this council. Humans are perhaps the most amusing species I have ever researched." The hologram changed to show ancient human warriors fighting with swords and shields. "Look at their so-called gods of war," Nalturek continued. "Mars, Ares, Odin, Thor. These are the beings humans created in their fantasies to explain violence. They needed to imagine supernatural creatures because their own wars were so small and meaningless. A human war might kill thousands, maybe millions if they were particularly brutal. We lose more soldiers than that in training accidents." Several delegates nodded and made sounds of agreement. A few more laughed. The hologram shifted again, showing human spacecraft. They were small and slow compared to the massive ships used by most galactic species. "Their technology is centuries behind ours," Nalturek said. "Their ships can barely cross their own solar system in reasonable time. Their weapons use chemical reactions instead of plasma or antimatter. And their bodies?" He made a sound like a chuckle. "So fragile. They live for maybe 100 of their years if they are lucky. They need to breathe oxygen constantly. Their skin tears easily. They are practically made of water." Vraxian stood again, spreading all 4 of his arms wide. "I once read about human military history," he said. "They fought something called World War II. Do you know how long it lasted? 6 years. 6 entire years to fight a war on a single planet. My empire conquered 4 solar systems in less time than that." The laughter grew louder. Daewon noticed Ambassador Hyun-sik close his eyes slowly as if in pain. The old man had heard these same insults for decades. He had tried to explain human potential to the galaxy, but no one listened. A delegate from the aquatic Felshan species spoke up, his words translated through his water-filled helmet. "Perhaps we should simply give them what they ask for," the Felshan said. 3 defensive stations cannot hurt anyone. Let the humans have their toys. It might make them feel safer even if it does nothing." This somehow made the other delegates laugh even harder. The idea that humanity needed to feel safe, rather than actually being safe, was apparently the funniest thing they had heard all day. Vraxian raised one of his large hands to quiet the chamber. "I must vote against this request," he announced. "Not because 3 stations would threaten anyone, but because I believe we should not encourage humans to waste resources on military equipment. They do not understand how to use. Better they should focus on trade and agriculture. Perhaps mining. These are things humans can do without hurting themselves." Daewon felt his hands curl into fists behind the podium where no one could see. Jiwoo leaned slightly toward him and whispered, barely moving her lips. "Stay calm, sir. Let them talk." The vote was called. The result was not surprising. 87 species voted against the human request. Only 12 voted in favor. mostly small species that knew what it felt like to be dismissed by the powerful. One species abstained. The council leader, a being of pure energy contained in a crystal form, spoke in a voice that sounded like bells. The request of humanity is denied. This council finds no credible threat to human space that would justify defensive installations. Furthermore, this council suggests that humanity focus on improving their economic output and continue their role as junior members of the galactic community. This session is concluded. Daewon bowed slightly as protocol required. He turned and walked toward the exit, with Jiwoo and Ambassador Hyunsik following him. Behind them, he could hear the delegates already moving on to other business, chatting and laughing about various topics. The humans had already been forgotten. In the corridor outside the chamber, Ambassador Hyunsik finally spoke. His voice was quiet but steady. 30 years, he said. 30 years I have tried to make them see, to make them understand what humans are capable of, but they only see what they want to see. Daewon looked at the old man with respect. You did your best, Ambassador. No one could have done more. Hyunsik shook his head slowly. They studied our myths, our legends, our stories, but they learned nothing. They think these stories are proof that we are weak and foolish. They do not understand that these stories are warnings. Jiwoo raised an eyebrow. Warnings, sir? The old ambassador looked at both of them with eyes that suddenly seemed much younger and harder. Our myths are not about what we imagine violence to be, he said quietly. They are about what we remember violence to be. Every god of war, every monster, every hero in our legends exists because our ancestors survived something terrible and needed to remember it. Needed to pass down the lesson. He paused at the door of their ship. These aliens think we invented scary stories because we are weak. The truth is the opposite. We invented scary stories because we survived scary things, and we wanted our children to be ready. Daewon felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not fear, something else. Something older. What happens now? Jiwoo asked. Hyunsik looked back toward the council chamber, where aliens were still laughing and conducting their business. Now, the old man said softly, now we go home and wait. The galaxy has made a terrible mistake today. They have forgotten the most important rule about humans. What rule is that? Daewon asked. Ambassador Hyunsik smiled, but there was no humor in it. Never laugh at a human's gods. Because unlike them, our gods were based on real things. Real battles. Real monsters. Real violence. And the capacity for all of that is still inside us. Waiting. The three humans boarded their small ship and departed from Prime World. Behind them, the galaxy continued its business, completely unaware that it had just made the worst decision in its long history. In the council chamber, Overlord Vraxian accepted congratulations from other delegates for his entertaining speech. He felt proud of himself. He had put those pretentious humans in their place. He had no idea that in less than a year, he would watch those same humans burn his empire to ashes. No idea that the toys and myths he had mocked would become the nightmare that ended his reign. The galaxy laughed at human myths that day. Soon they would stop laughing forever. The colony of New Jeju had existed for 23 years on the edge of human space. It was a mining world, rich in rare metals that Earth needed for ship construction. 15,000 people lived there, working hard to build a new life far from their home planet. They had farms under protective domes, schools for their children, and small parks where families gathered on weekends. Governor Taehyun stood in his office on the morning the world ended, drinking coffee and reviewing production reports. He was a practical man in his 50s who had moved to New Jeju to escape the crowded cities of Earth. He liked the quiet life on the frontier. He liked that everyone knew everyone else. He liked that his biggest problems were usually equipment breakdowns and scheduling conflicts. The alarm started at exactly 9 in the morning, local time. Taehyun dropped his coffee cup when he saw the radar display. 12 ships had just appeared at the edge of the system. Large ships, warships, and they were not human. He reached for his communication panel with shaking hands. This is Governor Taehyun of New Jeju Colony. Unknown vessels, please identify yourselves and state your intentions. You are entering human space without authorization. The response came quickly, a deep rumbling voice that Taehyun recognized from news broadcasts. Overlord Vraxian. Human colony, you are now property of the Krellite Empire. Surrender immediately and you will be processed as workers. Resist and you will be eliminated. Taehyun felt ice water flood his veins. We are a civilian colony. We have no military value. We are protected under galactic law. Vraxian's laughter cut him off. Protected by whom? Your pathetic Earth? Your toy ships? You have no protection, human. You have no power. You are resources to be collected. You have 10 minutes to gather in your central square. Anyone found hiding will be killed. This is your only warning. The communication ended. Taehyun stared at the blank screen for 3 seconds. Then his training took over. He had been a soldier once, decades ago, before becoming a governor. He slammed his hand on the colony-wide emergency broadcast button. This is Governor Taehyun. We are under attack. This is not a drill. All civilians proceed immediately to evacuation shelters. Security personnel, arm yourselves and prepare defensive positions. We need to buy time for a distress signal to reach the fleet. He knew it was hopeless. The nearest human military ships were 3 days away at best. But he had to try. In the eastern sector of the colony, a woman named Young Mi heard the alarm in her apartment. She was 32 years old, a mining engineer who had moved to New Jeju 5 years ago. She was also a veteran of Earth's military, though she rarely talked about it. Young Mi moved fast. She grabbed her emergency pack from the closet and ran into the hallway. All around her, she could hear families crying and screaming. Parents trying to calm children. Old people moving too slowly. Everyone moved to shelter level 3. She shouted, "Now, carry anyone who cannot walk." She helped an elderly man down the stairs, then ran back up to check for stragglers. That was when she saw the little girl standing alone in a doorway crying. Maybe 6 years old, lost. Young Mi scooped up the child and ran. The shelters were underground, built to protect against meteor strikes and equipment failures. They had thick walls and sealed doors. They were never meant to protect against a military attack. Young Mi got the little girl into the shelter just as the first explosions began above them. The ground shook. Lights flickered. People screamed. Through the shelter's small viewing monitors, Young Mi watched the colony die. The Krellite ships did not land soldiers at first. They simply fired their weapons at any building where their scanners detected movement. Plasma fire tore through the protective domes. People caught outside simply vanished in bursts of superheated air. The colony's small security force tried to fight back. They had 20 officers with basic rifles meant for dealing with wildlife and the occasional drunk miner. They fired at the Krellite landing craft when they finally arrived. It made no difference. The Krellites wore armor that shrugged off the human bullets like raindrops. They were huge and strong and utterly without mercy. Young Mi watched on the monitor as they dragged people from their homes. Anyone who fought was killed. Anyone who ran was killed. Anyone too old or too young to work was killed. In the shelter, people were crying, praying, holding each other. Young Mi looked around and saw a maintenance panel. Behind it would be tools. She moved to the panel and opened it, pulling out a plasma cutter and a heavy wrench. An older man next to her whispered, "What are you doing?" "Getting ready," Young Mi said quietly. "They will find this shelter eventually. And when they open that door, I'm going to make them pay for every step they take inside." The man stared at her. Then he nodded and reached for a tool of his own. Others followed. 27 people in that shelter picked up whatever they could use as weapons. They knew it was hopeless. But they were human, and humans did not go quietly into the dark. The Krellites found the shelter 3 hours later. When they cut through the sealed door, Young Mi and the others attacked with everything they had. The fight lasted 90 seconds. 23 humans died. 4 survived, including Young Mi, who had been knocked unconscious by an explosion. When she woke up, she was in a cage with dozens of other colonists, being loaded onto a transport ship. Governor Taehyun was in the same cage. He was bleeding from a head wound and his arm was broken, but he was alive. "How many?" Young Mi asked him quietly. "Dead? 3,000 at least," Taehyun said. His voice was empty. "They took the rest as slaves. They are taking us to their empire to work in their factories and mines." Young Mi looked around at the crying children, the wounded adults, the faces filled with shock and grief. She felt something burning inside her chest. Not fear, not sadness, rage. "Earth will come for us," she said. Taehyun shook his head. "Earth does not have the power to challenge the Krellite Empire. We are on our own." Young Mi met his eyes. "Then Earth will get the power. They will come. And when they do, these monsters will learn what humans are really capable of. The transport ship lifted off, carrying its cargo of human slaves into the darkness of space. Behind it, New Jeju burned. The farms were destroyed. The schools were rubble. The small parks where families had gathered were now filled with bodies. By the time Captain Daewon and Commander Jiwoo arrived with 3 human warships, the colony was silent. Daewon stood in the ruins of the central square, where Governor Taehyun had once reviewed production reports over morning coffee. Now there was only ash and blood. Jiwoo approached him, her face pale but controlled. "We found survivors in some of the outer shelters, maybe 200 people. The rest are either dead or taken." Daewon said nothing for a long moment. He simply stared at the destruction around him. "Send a message to Earth," he finally said. His voice was very quiet and very cold. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them the Krellites did this under direct orders from Overlord Vraxian. Tell them we need a council session immediately." "Yes, sir," Jiwoo said. Then hesitantly, "Sir, what do you think Earth will do?" Daewon looked up at the sky where the Krellite ships had vanished into faster-than-light travel. "I think," he said slowly, "that the galaxy is about to learn a very important lesson." "What lesson is that?" Daewon turned to face her. Jiwoo had served with him for 8 years. She had never seen his eyes look like this before. Cold and hard and utterly without mercy. "That humans have been very, very patient," Daewon said, "and that patience has limits." 2 weeks later, humanity brought evidence of the New Jeju massacre to the Galactic Council. They showed images of the dead, recordings of Vraxian's orders, testimony from survivors. The council listened. Then they offered their thoughts and concerns. Several delegates suggested that perhaps the colony had been in disputed territory. Others implied that maybe the humans had provoked the attack somehow. None of them offered to help. Overlord Vraxian sat in his seat and said nothing. He did not even pretend to be sorry. He simply smiled. That was when Captain Daewon, standing at the human podium, said the words that changed everything. "You studied our myths," Daewon said quietly. "You laughed at our gods of war. You mocked our history. You should have studied it instead. You should have asked yourselves why a species that barely left its own planet has so many words for different types of warfare, so many stories about violence and revenge and justice." He paused. "Humanity is withdrawing from this council. We no longer recognize your authority. We no longer seek your permission. From this moment forward, we will defend ourselves, and we will have justice for our dead." The chamber erupted in protests and laughter. Daewon ignored them all. He walked out with Jiwoo and the rest of the human delegation behind him. Ambassador Hyun-sik, watching from Earth, smiled for the first time in 30 years. The galaxy had laughed at humanity for the last time. Now came the storm. 6 months passed after humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council. 6 months of silence from human space. The borders closed. Communication stopped. Trade ships that tried to enter human territory were turned away by automated defense systems. No one came in. No one came out. The galaxy began to wonder what was happening. In the crystal towers of the Galactic Council headquarters, delegates met in worried sessions. They had expected humanity to complain more, maybe impose some trade restrictions, perhaps ask for sanctions against the Krellite Empire. They had not expected complete silence. "Perhaps they have accepted their place," suggested the Felshan delegate, his aquatic voice bubbling through his translator. "Maybe they realized they cannot challenge us and have gone home to sulk." But others were not so sure. Krellite spy ships tried to enter human space to gather intelligence. 3 ships went in. None came back. No debris was found. No distress signals were sent. They simply vanished as if they had never existed. Overlord Vraxian received these reports in his throne room on the Krellite home world. He sat on a massive chair made of metal taken from conquered worlds, surrounded by advisors and military commanders. "Send more ships," he ordered. "I want to know what the humans are doing." His intelligence officer, a thin Krellite named Vex, hesitated. "My lord, perhaps we should exercise caution. The disappearance of 3 spy ships is unusual. They are humans." Vraxian roared. "What can they possibly do to threaten us?" "Send 10 ships if you are so worried." "Send 20. Vex bowed and left to carry out the orders. Meanwhile, independent traders who operated on the edges of civilized space began bringing back strange stories. A freighter captain from the neutral Pactar species arrived at a station near the human border with a tale that seemed impossible. "I was 3 light years from Earth's system. the captain said to anyone who would listen. My sensors picked up massive energy readings. I moved closer to investigate. And I saw... He paused, his three eyes wide with fear or wonder. I saw shipyards. Hundreds of them. Orbiting asteroids that had been hollowed out and converted into factories. And ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships being built. Most listeners laughed at this story. Humans could barely build ships at all. Everyone knew that. But the stories kept coming. A mining vessel reported seeing an entire asteroid field being systematically dismantled, the raw materials being processed at impossible speeds. A science ship detected fusion signatures consistent with weapons testing on a scale that dwarfed anything in modern galactic warfare. A long-range probe captured brief footage before being destroyed. Footage that showed what looked like massive construction platforms building something enormous in the darkness between stars. Minister Haywan stood in the command center deep beneath Earth's surface and watched the real-time feeds from across human space. She was 55 years old with sharp eyes and silver hair tied back in a tight bun. She had been Minister of Defense for 20 years, and she had been preparing for this day for most of that time. Status report, she said calmly. A young officer responded immediately. All shipyards are operating at maximum capacity. The Mars facilities are ahead of schedule. The lunar factories have exceeded production quotas by 15%. The belt facilities are... Numbers, Haywan interrupted. Give me numbers. The officer consulted his display. As of this morning, we have completed 4,612 warships of various classes. An additional 3,000 are in final stages of construction. Ground forces have reached target strength of 15 million active soldiers with full equipment. The reserve forces number... Enough, Haywan said. She allowed herself a small smile. It is enough. Behind her, Admiral Su-jin entered the command center. She was tall and moved with the confidence of someone who had spent 40 years in space combat. She had been pulled out of retirement specifically for this moment. Minister, Su-jin said, the fleet is ready. Haywan turned to face her. All of it? Every ship. Every soldier. Every weapon. We are ready to deploy on your order. Haywan nodded slowly. She walked to the large window that overlooked the underground facility. Below she could see hundreds of soldiers training, equipment being loaded, ships being fueled. Do you remember? Haywan said quietly. When I first came to you 20 years ago with this plan, when I said we needed to prepare for the day when the galaxy would betray us, Su-jin stood beside her. You said they would see our kindness as weakness, our patience as fear. You said we needed to be ready to remind them what humans are capable of. And you said I was paranoid, Haywan replied with a slight smile. I did, Su-jin admitted. I was wrong. You were right. And now we have the strongest military force in known space, built in secret while the galaxy laughed at us. Haywan's smile faded. Strength without wisdom is just brutality. We are not doing this for conquest. We are doing this for justice. For the people of New Jeju. For every human who has been dismissed and mocked and hurt because the galaxy thought we were too weak to matter. And after? Su-jin asked. After we have justice? After, Haywan said, we make sure this never happens again. To anyone, we will give the galaxy a new order, one where strength is used to protect the weak, not exploit them. She turned away from the window. Send a message to the Galactic Council. Audio only. They do not deserve to see my face. The communication technicians worked quickly. Within minutes, the channel was open. Every member of the Galactic Council would receive this message simultaneously. Haywan spoke clearly and calmly. This is Minister Haywan of Earth. 6 months ago, you refused to help us when we were attacked. You offered words instead of action. You suggested we accept our place in your order. We have considered your advice, and we reject it. Humanity does not accept the place you chose for us. We choose our own place, and we choose justice. You wanted us to know our limitations. You were about to learn yours. She gestured to a technician who brought up a holographic display. It showed the deployment of the human fleet in real time. Thousands of ships moving into formation, carriers that could launch hundreds of fighters. Battleships with enough firepower to level cities, stealth frigates that could slip through sensor nets, and in the center the flagships, massive vessels that dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. These ships were built while you laughed at us, Haywan continued. They incorporate 4,000 years of human warfare experience. Every lesson we learned from fighting each other, we have applied to fighting you. Every tactical innovation from our bloodiest wars we have adapted for space combat. We are not the weak species you thought you knew. We are the species that conquered our own planet through sheer determination and violence. And we did it without any help from you. She paused, letting the images sink in. This message is primarily for Overlord Vraxian and the Krellite Empire. You attacked our colony. You killed our people. You took our children as slaves. You did this because you thought we could not respond. You were wrong. The human fleet is now moving toward your territory. We are coming for justice. And we are bringing everything we have. To the rest of the galaxy, stay out of our way. This is between humanity and the Krellites. But if anyone interferes, you will learn the same lesson. Haywan ended the transmission. In the Galactic Council chamber, chaos erupted. Delegates shouted at each other. Some called for immediate military intervention. Others argued for negotiation. A few simply stared at the holographic display of the human fleet in shocked silence. The Felshan delegate spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. This must be a trick, some kind of illusion. Humans cannot possibly have built such a fleet in secret. We would have known. Our intelligence services would have detected it. But even as he spoke, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The traitor stories were true. The energy readings were real. The ships were real, and they were moving. Overlord Vraxian stood in his throne room watching the same message. His forearms clenched into fists. Impossible, he said. This is a bluff. They are trying to scare us with computer graphics and false reports. Vex, his intelligence officer, stepped forward nervously. My lord, our long-range sensors confirm the fleet exists. The signatures are genuine. The ships are real. Then we will destroy them, Vraxian roared. Gather the fleet, all of it. Every ship in the Empire. We will crush these insects. But in his eyes, for the first time in his long life, there was a flicker of uncertainty, a small seed of doubt. What if the humans were serious? What if their myths and legends were not fantasies but memories? What if, by attacking them, he had awakened something that should have been left sleeping? In orbit above Earth, Admiral Sujin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built. Its hull was thick armor designed to withstand punishment that would vaporize any other ship. Its weapons were a combination of missiles, railguns, lasers, and plasma cannons. Everything humans had ever imagined for space combat, all built into one vessel. Around the Indomitable, the fleet assembled. 4,000 ships in perfect formation, each one crewed by soldiers who had trained for this. The fortress at the edge of Krellite space was called Kethral. It had stood for 200 years, defending the Empire's borders from any threat. Its weapons could destroy 100 ships. Its shields could withstand sustained bombardment from an entire fleet. It had never fallen in battle. Commodore Daywan stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Relentless, and studied the fortress through his view screen. Beside him, Commander Jiwoo reviewed tactical data on her display. The fortress has detected us, Jiwoo reported calmly. They are powering up weapons and raising shields. Standard defensive protocol. How many defenders? Daywan asked. Approximately 50,000 Krellite soldiers. 26 warships docked at the station. The fortress commander is Warlord Krell, one of Vraxian's most experienced officers. Daywan nodded. He opened a communication channel to the entire strike group, 200 human ships under his command. All vessels. This is Commodore Daywan. The fortress ahead is our first target. They expect us to be weak. They expect us to run when they show their strength. Do not prove them right. Show them what human determination looks like. All ships attack Formation Delta. Carriers, launch your fighters. Battleships target the main shield generators. Let us begin. The human fleet moved forward. On Kethral Fortress, Warlord Krell watched the approaching ships with contempt. He was old for a Krellite. His gray skin marked with scars from 100 battles. He had fought against dozens of species and never lost. They are actually attacking, he said with amusement. I thought they would turn back when they saw our defenses. His second-in-command was less confident. Sir, there are many of them. Perhaps we should request reinforcements. Reinforcements? Krell laughed. For humans? Watch and learn how easily we crush these insects. He gave the order to fire. The fortress's weapons blazed to life. Massive plasma cannons that could vaporize a ship in one shot. Missile batteries that could saturate space with explosives. energy beams that could cut through any armor. The human fleet did not scatter or retreat. Instead, they did something unexpected. They flew into the fire. The human ships were built with armor that was thicker and heavier than anything the Krellites had seen. They were designed based on an ancient human naval doctrine. Take the hit, survive it, and keep fighting. Some ships were hit directly by plasma fire. Their armor scorched and melted, but they kept coming. Missiles exploded against their hulls, leaving craters and damage, but the ships did not break apart. "What are they made of?" Krell's second-in-command whispered in shock. From the human carriers, hundreds of small fighters launched. They moved in coordinated groups, each one covering the others. The Krellites tried to shoot them down, but the human pilots flew with skills honed from centuries of aerial combat on Earth. They dodged and weaved through defensive fire, closing the distance. Then came something the Krellites had never seen before: drone missiles, small automated craft that flew in swarms, overwhelming point defense systems. The Krellites shot down dozens, but hundreds more got through. Sang-min was one of the fighter pilots. He was 26 years old and had been flying simulators since he was a teenager. Now he flew for real, his fighter dancing through space at incredible speeds. "Red Squadron, form up on me," he called to his team. "We are going for the shield generator on the northern section. Follow my lead." His squadron dove toward the fortress, defensive fire blazing all around them. One ship was hit and exploded. Another lost a wing but kept flying. Sang-min led them through a gap in the defensive net and released his missiles directly at the shield generator. The explosions were beautiful and terrible. "Generator is down," Sang-min shouted. "I repeat, northern shield generator is destroyed." All across the fortress, human fighters were doing the same thing, targeting specific weak points, using tactics that the Krellites had never encountered, working together with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. Warlord Krell watched his shields failing section by section and felt something he had not felt in decades: fear. "All ships, counterattack," he ordered. "Kill them! Kill them all!" The Krellite warships docked at the station launched and moved to engage. They were strong vessels, well-armed and well-crewed. They should have been able to destroy the human ships easily, but then the human battleships opened fire. The sound of railguns firing in space is actually silent, but everyone who saw it described hearing thunder anyway. Massive slugs of metal accelerated to incredible speeds, crossing space in seconds and slamming into Krellite ships with devastating force. One Krellite cruiser took a direct hit and simply broke in half. Another was hit 3 times in rapid succession and turned into floating debris. The Krellites fought back desperately, but they were confused. The human tactics made no sense according to galactic warfare standards. Human ships worked in groups of 3 or 4, covering each other like ancient pack hunters. They used their heavier armor to shield more damaged ships. They communicated constantly, adjusting their strategy second by second. This was warfare as humans had practiced it for thousands of years. Not individual duels of honor, not demonstrations of superior technology, but brutal, efficient, coordinated violence designed to win at any cost. Daewon watched the battle from his command chair, his face calm, but his eyes intense. "Jiwoo, status of the fortress? Shields are at 30% and falling. Their command center is exposed. Recommend we deploy boarding teams." Agreed. Launch the drop troopers. From the assault carriers, hundreds of small pods launched toward the fortress. Inside each pod were human soldiers in full combat armor. Young Mi was in the first wave. Her pod slammed into the fortress hull with bone-jarring force. The cutting lasers activated automatically, burning through the outer armor. Then the pod doors exploded open and Young Mi was inside, her rifle up and ready. The corridor was full of Krellite soldiers. They were huge and strong, but Young Mi and her squad did not hesitate. They moved forward with the precision of a machine, each soldier covering a specific angle, each shot deliberate and controlled. A Krellite rushed at Young Mi with a massive blade. She shot him in the knee, then twice in the chest as he fell. Another tried to flank her team. Her squadmate caught him with a grenade that filled the corridor with shrapnel. "Keep moving," Young Mi ordered. "Head for the command center. Do not stop." The fighting was vicious. Room by room, corridor by corridor, the humans pushed forward. The Krellites were individually stronger, but the humans fought as units. When one soldier was wounded, others dragged him to cover. When ammunition ran low, they shared. When a position seemed impossible to take, they found another way. This was warfare learned from thousands of years of humans fighting humans. Every tactic, every strategy, every dirty trick that had worked on Earth was now being used against the Krellites. Warlord Krell found himself retreating to the command center with his remaining officers. The fortress was falling apart around him. The shields were gone. Half his ships were destroyed. Human soldiers were everywhere, clearing the station section by section. How? He kept muttering. How are they doing this? His second-in-command, bleeding from multiple wounds, finally understood. They are warriors, sir. Real warriors. Not like us. We fight for glory and honor. They fight to win. There is a difference. The door to the command center exploded inward. Young Mi and her squad entered, weapons raised. Krell reached for his sidearm, but Young Mi was faster. Her shot took the weapon from his hand without hitting him. Surrender, she said coldly. Or die. Choose now. Krell looked around at his remaining officers. All of them were wounded. All of them were exhausted. All of them were broken. I surrender, he said quietly. The Battle of Kethral lasted 6 hours. The fortress that was supposed to be impregnable fell in less than a day. The Krellites lost 26 warships and 50,000 soldiers. The humans lost 74 ships and 12,000 soldiers, but they won. Day one stood in the ruins of the command center and looked at the captured warlord. Krell, you mocked our myths, Day One said quietly. You laughed at our gods of war. Do you understand now? Those myths were not fantasies. They were lessons. Every human child learns about Mars and Ares and Odin. Every human child learns that we are capable of terrible violence when necessary. You thought these were signs of weakness. They were warnings. Krell said nothing. What could he say? News of the battle spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as the reports came in. The impossible had happened. Humans had not just won a battle, they had destroyed one of the strongest fortresses in the galaxy in hours. And they were not stopping. Admiral Su Jin's main fleet was already moving toward the next. Kelida System, then the next, then the next. Each battle was the same. The Krellites fought bravely, but they were facing something they did not understand. They were facing a species that had turned warfare into an art form through pure necessity. Sang Min became an ace pilot after his 9th confirmed kill. He was interviewed by military journalists who asked how humans were winning. We are not better than them, Sang Min said. We are not stronger or faster, but we have been fighting each other for our entire history. We know every trick, every tactic. The trial of Overlord Vraxian was held on neutral ground, at the Galactic Council station above Prime World. But this time, everything was different. Human warships surrounded the station, not threatening, not firing, just present, a silent reminder of what would happen if anyone tried to interfere with justice. Inside the Great Chamber, delegates from 100 species gathered to watch. But now they did not laugh or mock. They sat in silence, many of them afraid. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and everyone knew it. Commodore Day One stood at the human podium, but he was not there to beg for permission this time. He was there to deliver judgment. Overlord Vraxian was brought into the chamber in restraints. The massive Krellite leader looked smaller somehow, defeated and broken. His forearms hung limply at his sides. His eyes, once so full of arrogance, were empty. Day One spoke clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Overlord Vraxian, you stand accused of ordering the attack on New Jeju Colony, resulting in the deaths of 3,000 human civilians and the enslavement of 12,000 more. You stand accused of violating galactic law prohibiting attacks on civilian populations. You stand accused of crimes against sentient beings. How do you answer these charges? Vraxian stood silent for a long moment. Then quietly, he spoke, guilty. I am guilty of all charges. A murmur went through the chamber. No one had expected him to admit it so easily. Day One continued. The evidence is clear. The recordings of your orders. The testimony of survivors. The bodies we found in the ruins of our colony. There is no doubt about what happened. The only question is what justice looks like. He paused and looked around the chamber. 6 months ago, we brought this same evidence to the same council. We asked for help. We asked for justice. And you laughed at us. You told us to accept our place. You told us we were too weak to matter. Several delegates looked down at their seats, unable to meet his gaze. We learned an important lesson that day, Day One said. We learned that in this galaxy, Justice does not come from laws or councils. It comes from strength. And so we became strong, strong enough that you can no longer ignore us, strong enough that you can no longer dismiss us, strong enough that when we demand justice, you have no choice but to listen. Minister Haewon entered the chamber. She walked calmly to stand beside Daewon. Behind her came Admiral Soo-jin, Commander Ji-woo, and young Mi, still wearing her sergeant's uniform. Humanity has won its war, Haewon announced. We have defeated the Krellite Empire. We have rescued our people from slavery. We have avenged our dead. But victory alone is not enough. We demand changes, real changes, to prevent this from ever happening again. She activated a holographic display that showed humanity's proposed reforms. First, any attack on civilian populations by any species will result in immediate military response by an alliance of willing species. Second, slavery in all forms is banned across all galactic territory. Third, weaker species will be protected by law with enforcement mechanisms that actually work. Fourth, this council will no longer be a place where the powerful mock the weak. It will be a place where all species have a voice that matters. The Felshan delegate, his voice bubbling nervously through his translator, spoke up. And if we refuse these demands, Haewon looked at him calmly, then humanity will enforce them ourselves. We did not build this fleet for one war. We built it to ensure our safety and the safety of others. If this council will not provide justice, we will. The choice is yours. Several of the more powerful delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few looked angry, but none of them spoke against the proposals. They had seen what happened to the Krellite Empire. None of them wanted to be next. The delegate from the Zentar Confederation, a species of insectoid beings, stood up. They had been one of the few species that voted to help humanity 6 months ago. The Zentar Confederation supports these reforms, the delegate announced. We have long believed that the strong should protect the weak, not exploit them. Humanity has proven they have the strength. If they are willing to use it for justice, we stand with them. One by one, other delegates stood and voiced their support. Some were genuine. Some were afraid. But all of them voted yes. The reforms passed unanimously. Daewon turned back to Vraxian. As for you, Overlord Vraxian, you will be imprisoned for life. Your empire is dissolved. Your territory will be administered by a coalition of species until its people are ready to govern themselves. Your name will be remembered as a warning about what happens to those who prey on the innocent. Vraxian nodded slowly. He looked at Daewon with something that might have been respect. I underestimated you. The former overlord said quietly. I underestimated your entire species. I thought your myths and legends were fantasies. I was wrong. They were memories. Warnings from your past about what you are capable of in the future? Yes, Daewon replied. And now the galaxy knows it too. Guards led Vraxian away. The trial was over. 3 months later, young Mi returned to New Jeju. The colony was being rebuilt. New domes were rising from the ashes. New farms were being planted. New families were moving in, ready to start over. She walked through the memorial garden that had been built in the central square. 3,000 names were carved into a wall of stone, one for each person who had died in the attack. Young Mi found the name of the little girl she had tried to save. The child had not made it. She had died in the shelter when the Krellites broke through. Young Mi placed a flower at the base of the memorial and stood in silence for a long time. Governor Tae-hyun approached her. He had recovered from his wounds and returned to his position. He looked older now, with new lines in his face, but his eyes were clear. Thank you, he said simply, for what you did, for fighting for us. Young Mi shook her head. I did what any human would do, what any soldier would do. I fought for my people. Will you stay? Tae-hyun asked. The colony needs good people, people who understand what we lost and what we are building. Young Mi looked around at the construction, at the families unpacking their belongings, at the children playing in a temporary park. Yes, she said, I will stay. This is my home. These are my people. I will help rebuild. On Earth, in the underground command center, Minister Haewon met with Admiral Soo-jin and discussed the future. The other species are afraid of us now, Soo-jin said. Some are already calling us the new threat to galactic peace. Let them be afraid, Haewon replied. Fear is better than contempt, but we must be careful. Power without wisdom leads to tyranny. We must use our strength to protect, not to dominate. And if others challenge us, then we remind them why challenging us is a mistake. But we do not seek war. We seek peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from mutual respect, not mutual weakness. Ambassador Hyun-sik, now retired, watched the news broadcasts from his small apartment in Seoul. He saw the images of the rebuilt colony. He saw the reformed Galactic Council. He saw human ships patrolling space, protecting trade routes, and defending weaker species from aggression. He smiled. After 30 years of trying to make the galaxy respect humanity through diplomacy and patience, it had taken a war to achieve what words could not. It was not the outcome he had wanted, but it was the outcome that worked. His communication terminal chimed. It was a message from Daewon, now promoted to admiral and commanding the border fleet. Ambassador Hyun-sik, I wanted to thank you personally. You spent 30 years trying to teach them to respect us. It did not work, but it was not your fault. You cannot teach respect to those who are determined to be arrogant. Sometimes respect must be taken, not given. Your work was not wasted. It showed us who would listen and who would not. It helped us prepare for what we needed to do. Thank you for your service. The galaxy is better because you tried. Hyun-sik read the message twice, then closed his eyes and felt tears on his cheeks. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. After 3 decades, his people were finally safe, finally respected, finally strong enough that no one would dare hurt them again. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Su-jin looked out at the stars. Her fleet was spread across human space and beyond, a protective shield for humanity and its allies. Ships bearing names from human history and mythology, indomitable, relentless, defiant, victorious. Each one a reminder that humanity had survived and thrived. Commander Jiwoo approached her with a report. Admiral, we have requests from 17 species asking for defense treaties with humanity. They want our protection. Grant them, Su-jin said, but make it clear, we protect those who cannot protect themselves. We do not protect aggressors. We are not building an empire. We are building something better. What is that, Admiral? A galaxy where strength is used for justice, where the weak are protected, not exploited, where species can grow and thrive without fear. It is not perfect. Nothing ever is. But it is better than what we had. Sang-min, now a decorated fighter ace, gave an interview to Galactic News Services. They asked him about the war and how humanity had won. We did not win because we were better, he said. We won because we had to. When you give humans no choice but to fight, we become very good at it. We have spent thousands of years fighting each other, learning every possible way to survive combat.